He walked into the dealership wearing a faded green jacket holding his daughter's hand, and they treated him like he didn't belong. What no one knew was that this quiet single dad was not only the new owner, he was the man who had once saved the company founder's life. And when the truth finally came out, the entire room would never see respect the same way again. The glass front of Prestige Motors gleamed in the morning sun, reflecting the luxury sedans inside like a mirrored promise. Sleek curves, shining chrome, six-figure dreams wrapped in German precision. And then, a soft creak of worn leather boots broke the polished silence. Michael Turner stepped onto the showroom tile, his posture tall, his pace steady, deliberate. A man who didn't flinch under fluorescent lights or the judgment they brought. His green military jacket faded at the seams, and soft from age, looked out of place against the gloss of the dealership. But he didn't seem to notice, or if he did, he didn't care. Beside him, Daisy, no more than 10, clutched a small bouquet of white peonies, their paper wrapping rustling faintly in her hands. Her ponytail bounced as she walked. Her other hand was curled tightly around her father's calloused fingers. They stopped in front of a vintage burgundy Cadillac, polished to perfection, stationed like a museum piece under a halo of light. Daisy looked up at it with wide eyes. She would have loved this one, she whispered. Michael smiled faintly. That kind of smile that said everything and nothing at the same time. Yeah, he said. She would have. He crouched beside Daisy, one hand resting on his knee, the other brushing a speck of lint from her shoulder. "Do you remember what Mom called this model?" he asked softly. Daisy nodded. The car with the wings. She said it looked like it was flying even when parked. Michael's eyes didn't leave the car. Flying. And free. The moment held, until a voice cut through the air like the first crack of thunder on a quiet day. "Excuse me, can I help you?" The woman's heels clicked sharply as she approached. Her black blazer was tailored her expression even more so. Tessa Morgan, showroom manager, and from the look on her face, not a fan of surprises. Michael stood slowly. He didn't bristle, didn't shrink, just straightened like a flag in the wind and turned to meet her eyes. "We're just looking," he said calmly, "just passing through." Tessa's gaze flicked over the green jacket, the military-style boots, the small bouquet in Daisy's hands. Her tone didn't soften. "These vehicles aren't for play, sir. They're high-value assets. And we don't allow lingering." Michael tilted his head slightly. "We're not playing." Daisy looked up at Tessa, blinking, still holding the flowers. "I just wanted to see the car my mom loved," she said. Tessa shifted her weight, caught off guard, but the showroom had begun to take notice. Two salesmen behind the front desk exchanged glances. A security guard hovered near the front entrance. "I'm sure your mother had excellent taste," Tessa said. Tone clipped. "But if you're not here with purchasing intent, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Michael finished gently. Tessa nodded, folding her arms. Michael looked down at Daisy. Her shoulders had stiffened, but she said nothing. He looked back up, voice quiet. "We didn't mean to cause trouble." His hand briefly tightened on Daisy's, a silent signal. Then just before turning to go, Michael looked back at Tessa and said one line, softly, calmly, but with the weight of a man who had seen desserts turn to ash and friends vanish into dust. "You're judging a book by its cover, ma'am, but some covers are worn because they've been carried through fire." Tessa blinked. The line didn't register right away, but something about the way he said it, without bitterness, without anger, made her pause. Michael turned away, pulling out a small, scratched-up flip phone. No iPhone, no screen glare, just numbers punched in with precision. He walked a few paces aside his back, straight speaking into the receiver, in a voice low enough not to carry, but firm enough that a few heads turned anyway. Daisy stood quietly holding her bouquet, still staring at the Cadillac. Her lip trembled once, but she pressed it into a firm line. Inside the dealership, something had shifted. Invisible, but real. Tessa crossed her arms again. "We've had scammers before," she muttered under her breath. "People pretending to be buyers." The receptionist didn't respond. Neither did the guard. Because from the corner of the showroom, one of the senior salesmen was watching the man in the green jacket with narrowed eyes. "I think I've seen him before," he said slowly. "Back when I worked security for that DC embassy event. The hostage thing." The whisper got swallowed by the polished air conditioning, but it had already started. The feeling, the curiosity, the question everyone in the showroom was starting to ask: who is this man? The receptionist's forced smile was beginning to wilt as the murmur of unease grew in the showroom. Eyes were darting. Conversations had slowed. The man in the green jacket had said nothing more, but his presence now echoed louder than the sleek purr of any engine inside the dealership. Tessa Morgan still standing a few paces from Michael, and Daisy felt a simmering discomfort rise in her chest. It wasn't guilt, not yet. Just that distinct irritation that came when something didn't go the way she expected, and she hated that. She smoothed the front of her blazer and approached the front desk. "Why is he still here?" she whispered sharply to the receptionist. "I told him to leave." The receptionist hesitated. "He's just standing there, talking on the phone." Quietly. Exactly, Tessa hissed, loitering, and making everyone uncomfortable. Behind her, Daisy leaned her head against Michael's arm. The call had ended. Michael had said just a few words into the line, then closed the phone slowly and slipped it into his jacket pocket. He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't even looked angry. But there was something in the way he had stood still as stone that unsettled people used to controlling a room. One of the junior salesmen, Devin, leaned in toward Tessa. "Want me to escort them out?" Tessa gave a curt nod. Devin squared his shoulders and walked toward the pair with the swagger of someone who had never been in a real fight and believed charm could compensate for judgment. He clapped his hands once too loudly, drawing attention. "Hey there. So, great seeing you and your little girl here today, but this is a high-end showroom. And unfortunately, we can't allow people to hang around unless they're actively working with a salesperson." Michael turned toward him slowly. His eyes didn't narrow, his brow didn't furrow, but the temperature seemed to drop by 3 degrees. Devin smiled nervously this time. Daisy tugged on her father's sleeve. "We were just gonna leave Dad," she said softly. Michael nodded. "That's right, sweetheart." Then he turned back to Devin and said calmly, "Thank you for the clarification." Devin shifted uncomfortably. "It's just, you know how it is." "I do," Michael replied. He reached down to take Daisy's hand, and that's when the bouquet slipped. One of the flowers fell to the polished floor, a soft peony, its bloom opening slightly as it landed. Daisy bent quickly to pick it up, but Devin, attempting to be helpful, or maybe just to show authority, beat her to it, and crushed it under his shoe. It wasn't intentional, not completely, but it wasn't an accident either. A petal tore. A silence followed. Daisy looked down at the mangled white bloom in his hand. Her lower lip trembled just slightly. Michael's hand clenched, then released. He took the ruined flower from Devin's hand gently. No words, just a nod. "Thank you," he said. Calm, low, controlled. But the tension in the room had shifted. It wasn't just awkward anymore. It was quietly wrong. Tessa's voice sliced through it. "What happened?" Devin turned, slightly flushed. "Nothing. Just a flower. We're good here." Tessa looked at Daisy, then Michael. Her tone was clipped professional. "Sir, again I must ask, do you have a scheduled appointment? A referral? Or are you simply browsing?" Michael met her gaze with an unnerving steadiness. "No appointment," he said. Tessa folded her arms. "Then unfortunately, I'll have to insist that you leave. This showroom is for serious buyers. This isn't a museum." Michael didn't blink. "Understood." He turned to Daisy and knelt down beside her, brushing a loose strand of hair from her cheek. "Hey," he said gently. "Want to say goodbye to the car?" Daisy's eyes glistened. She nodded. Together they walked toward the vintage Cadillac, the one his late wife had dreamed of, the one Daisy had come to see just once. Tessa moved to intercept them. "Sir," but Michael held up a hand, not to her, to the air, a gesture of peace. He knelt beside the open driver's side window. Daisy leaned in, resting the broken flower on the seat. "Just for Mom," she whispered. They stood. Then Michael turned to Tessa, and for the first time there was something behind his voice, not anger, not scorn, just the quiet weight of truth. "I didn't come to cause a scene. I didn't come to buy a car either. We came here to remember someone, a woman who dreamed of this exact model before cancer stole her breath. This was her favorite showroom. This was her favorite color." Tessa's mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. Michael continued. "I didn't expect special treatment. Just a moment. Just enough room for a little girl to lay down some flowers where her mother once stood smiling." He paused. "But I understand. Some things don't fit the image, especially not jackets like this." He nodded once. Then he took Daisy's hand and turned toward the exit. At that moment, something shifted again, this time in the eyes of those watching. The security guard, arms folded near the door, stepped aside. The receptionist, once rigid, blinked slowly, as if suddenly ashamed of something. A few sales staff looked down at their shoes, and in the corner, one older mechanic there to service a showroom test car simply muttered under his breath, "Damn shame." Tessa stood frozen as Michael and Daisy reached the door. Then her phone buzzed in her blazer pocket. A call. From a number she'd only seen a few times, one with a name that carried weight like few others. She picked up. "Hello." The voice on the other end was unmistakable. Calm, firm. Older. "Tessa, I'm coming to the dealership. Don't let him leave." Tessa blinked. I'm sorry, who?" But the line had already gone dead. The glass doors of the dealership hissed open as Michael and Daisy stepped toward them, bathed in the golden edge of the late morning sun. But just before they crossed the threshold, a voice behind them halted the moment, like a pin dropped in still water. "Wait." Tessa Morgan's voice cracked slightly as it rose too loud too late. Michael paused, turned halfway, his green jacket catching the light in soft folds. Tessa was moving toward him now, her phone still clutched tightly in one hand, her brow drawn low with confusion. Something in her had shifted, not softened, but rattled. The call had shaken her. She didn't know why, only that it had. She cleared her throat. "I just received a notice. A VIP guest is arriving, and until then, I'm going to have to ask that you wait outside." Michael's expression didn't change. "I thought I was already being asked to leave," he said evenly. "Yes, well." Tessa hesitated, trying to regain her footing. "Now I'm making it formal." Michael nodded, calm as ever. Daisy's hand found his. She looked up at him, her expression unreadable, half confusion, half something heavier. Something no child should have to carry. Michael crouched beside her again, his voice a low murmur only she could hear. "Remember what we say when things don't go our way," Daisy whispered. "We walk away with grace." Michael gave her a faint smile. "That's right. With grace." He stood again, turned back to Tessa. His tone didn't rise, but it resonated with something deeper, not force, not pride. Something almost like mercy. You don't have to raise your voice to make someone feel small. You already did that with your silence. Tessa blinked. His words hit harder than anything loud or angry ever could. Before she could respond, another voice broke the air. "Excuse me, what's going on here?" A woman in her mid-30s, dressed in a tailored burgundy dress suit and carrying a leather briefcase, had just stepped out of a luxury sedan parked near the service bay. She looked like an executive or a lawyer. Her eyes scanned the lobby and locked onto the strange tableau in front of her: a soldier-like man in faded green, a little girl holding crushed flowers, and a manager who suddenly looked like she'd forgotten how to speak. "Is there a problem?" the woman asked again. Tessa drew a shallow breath. "This man is leaving." Michael looked at Daisy, but before they could move again, Devon stepped forward, trying once again to take control of something he didn't understand. "Sir," he said, puffing his chest slightly, "this is your last warning. You've been asked to leave twice now. If you remain, we'll be forced to call the police." Daisy stiffened. Michael didn't blink. "You're welcome to call them," he said quietly. "I've spoken to them before." Devon opened his mouth, then shut it. He didn't know why the man's tone unsettled him, only that it did. Tessa crossed her arms again, more defensive than firm this time. "You're disrupting business." "I haven't raised my voice," Michael said. "I haven't blocked anyone's way. All I've done is walk beside my daughter." She placed flowers in a vehicle Michael gently interrupted, that no one was sitting in, that no one was buying, that no one even noticed until we stood near it. The receptionist, watching quietly from behind the counter, lowered her gaze, and for a moment, the only sound was the soft hum of the dealership's HVAC system. Then came the sound of heels. Fast, decisive, not panicked, purposeful. The dealership doors parted, and in walked a woman in her late 60s. Silver hair swept into a neat bun, a navy blue coat draped elegantly over her shoulders, eyes sharp and glistening beneath classic tortoiseshell frames. Every head in the showroom turned. Even Tessa straightened at the sight of her. Because Diana Matthews, founder and former CEO of Prestige Motors, hadn't stepped foot in that showroom in over 4 years. And now, here she was, walking with certainty, scanning the room until her eyes landed on one thing: Michael Turner. Her expression transformed, from determination to recognition to something closer to reverence. She closed the space between them in seconds, and without hesitation she reached forward and embraced him. Gasps rippled through the staff. Diana Matthews, legendary businesswoman, boardroom lioness, the woman who built an automotive empire from scratch, was now hugging a man in a worn military jacket as if he were her own flesh and blood. Michael didn't flinch. He returned the hug with quiet warmth, like an old soldier, returning to a place he didn't expect to be welcomed again. Daisy looked up, wide-eyed. She'd never seen this woman before. Tessa, meanwhile, looked like the blood had drained from her face. When Diana finally stepped back, her voice rang clear through the marble-floored showroom. "This man," she said, turning to everyone, "is the reason I'm standing here today." Stunned silence. Devon looked from Michael to Diana, then back again. Wait. What Tessa opened her mouth, nothing came out. Diana's gaze swept the room like a general in command. Her voice was still calm, but now undeniably authoritative. 12 years ago, I was in a hostile country on a philanthropic mission. A convoy I was in was attacked. Armed men opened fire. We were pinned down. It should have been the end for all of us. Her voice softened just slightly, but then a team of American operatives appeared. Fast, precise, unflinching. She looked at Michael, and one of them, this one, carried me through gunfire, threw me into an evac vehicle, took a bullet in his leg and didn't slow down once. Michael said nothing, didn't even move. Diana stepped closer, her voice dropping to something more personal. I never forgot you, Michael Turner. I just never thought I'd find you again. The room remained frozen. Then Diana turned to Tessa. Her tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. I asked you to run this place with dignity, with vision, not with prejudice. You asked this man to leave, Tessa stammered. I didn't know who he was. Diana cut her off. You didn't ask. Silence reigned. Michael took Daisy's hand again, and this time he didn't move toward the door, because everything was about to change. You could have heard a pin drop. The Prestige Motors showroom, normally a hum of chatter sales pitches and engine purrs, had fallen into stunned, reverent silence. The kind that follows truth when it arrives, wearing no armor and no apology. Diana Matthews, founder and former CEO, stood beside Michael Turner, like a sentinel, her presence reshaping the very air around them. Tessa Morgan hadn't moved. Her arms were still folded, but the defensive posture now looked more like a shield against regret than a stance of power. She tried to form a response, something managerial, something that could salvage authority, but no words came. Devon looked ready to crawl into the nearest display SUV and hide beneath the floor mats. And in the center of it all, Michael remained still. He didn't speak. He didn't posture. He simply stood there with the same calm he had carried in with him, as if this moment, for all its grandeur, hadn't changed who he was. Because it hadn't, it had only revealed it. Daisy tugged on his sleeve gently. She wasn't overwhelmed by the eyes on them. She was focused on something smaller, something real. Daddy, she whispered, the flower you picked up earlier, it's torn. Do you think Mom would still like it? Michael crouched beside her, ignoring the murmuring adults around them. The weight of Diana's presence, the shock on the faces of the staff, none of it mattered right now. He cupped Daisy's small hands, cradling the slightly crumpled bloom. She wouldn't care if it's torn, he said. She'd care that you remembered. Daisy nodded solemnly, then reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. A drawing, crayon lines, a car with wings, a woman smiling from inside it, a little girl standing nearby holding flowers, a man beside her tall in a green jacket. She held it up to him. I made this last night, she said, just in case we got to see the car. Michael blinked, not out of surprise, but from something deeper, that ache in the throat, that comes only when someone sees the heart behind your silence. He took the drawing and smiled. Then I guess we did more than remember today, he said softly. Is that her drawing? A quiet voice asked. They turned. Diana had stepped closer, eyes glistening as she looked at the picture. She was artistic, Diana asked. Michael stood. Her mother was. She's the better version of both of us. Diana's lips curved upward, a warm, knowing smile that had nothing to do with wealth or prestige. I'd like to frame that in the office, she said gently to Daisy. If you'd let me. Daisy's eyes lit up. Really, Michael nodded. Only if she signs it. Daisy beamed and scribbled in the corner, for Mom. Love, Daisy T. As Diana took the drawing and turned to walk toward the back office, the showroom gradually returned to motion, but the atmosphere was changed. Softer. Wiser. Tessa, standing near the front desk, finally found her voice. Michael, she began, clearing her throat. I didn't mean, but he raised a hand again, not to silence her, to relieve her. There's no need, he said gently. I've seen worse assumptions, from people wearing stars on their collars. Tessa looked down, shame now complete. I should have asked your name, she said quietly. Michael shrugged. You shouldn't need a name to show respect, she nodded, swallowing hard. Behind them, Diana disappeared into the glass office at the rear of the building. The blinds rolled down. A shadow moved across the window. Michael's phone buzzed in his jacket. He pulled it out, flipped it open. The number was familiar. The timing was not. He stepped outside, holding the door for Daisy. A gust of autumn wind rustled the trees across the parking lot. Red and gold leaves skittered along the sidewalk, like dancers rushing to keep up with the song. He answered the call with a simple, "Go ahead." The voice on the other end was crisp. Military. Male. "Sir, confirmation complete. Transfer finalized as of last quarter. All documents signed and verified under Diana Matthews' authority. Title ownership, operational oversight. Everything's yours." Michael said nothing. "Do you want me to notify counsel?" Michael paused. "No," he said. "Not yet." "Very good, sir. Anything else?" "Just one thing," Michael replied. He looked down at Daisy, who was spinning gently in a circle near the curb, her arms stretched like airplane wings. "Keep the files sealed. This isn't about me." "Understood." He hung up. The phone clicked shut with the soft finality of a chapter ending or beginning. Daisy skipped back to him. "Was that the same person you called earlier?" Michael nodded. "Are we in trouble?" Michael smiled. "Not even close. Is the lady with the silver hair going to be okay?" "She's always okay," Michael said. "She's stronger than most people realize." Daisy reached for his hand. "Like you," Michael didn't answer. Just squeezed her hand lightly. They walked back into the dealership where the energy had shifted completely. The staff didn't avoid eye contact now. They nodded. A few even smiled, hesitant, respectful. Devon gave a short, sheepish wave. Tessa stood straighter, but not in defense, in readiness. Readiness to listen. Diana emerged from the back office holding a file. She crossed the floor with purpose and extended it to Michael. No ceremony. No announcement. "Just facts," she said. "3 months ago, I gave you control of this showroom. You have full discretion. I stepped back because it needed someone with integrity at the helm." Michael didn't reach for the file. Instead, he looked at the staff, then back at Diana. "I'm not here to take anything," he said. "I just came to visit a memory." Diana nodded, and now Michael looked at Daisy. Now I think it's time they understand how memories shape culture. He finally took the file. The glass office doors opened with a soft click. Michael stood in the center of the dealership floor, now a man not demanding attention, but commanding presence, simply by existing like a mountain that had always been there, even if no one noticed until the fog cleared. Daisy held tightly to his hand. Her other hand still gripped the sketch she had made the crayon car, with wings now slightly wrinkled at the edges. Diana Matthews stepped out beside them, her frame small, but upright, elegant. She nodded once toward the staff, not in greeting, but as a signal, an invitation. To watch. And listen. "Everyone," she said, gently but firmly, "I'd like to take a moment. You've all just met a man named Michael Turner. And I'd like you to know why that matters." A murmur passed through the room. Phones were lowered. Conversations halted. "Some of you know I spent years abroad building humanitarian programs. Water treatment in war zones. School construction in devastated regions. What you don't know is that in 2010, during a mission trip in northern Africa, my convoy was attacked. 3 vehicles disabled. 2 drivers killed instantly. The color drained from a few faces. I was one of 5 civilians pulled from the vehicles and held at gunpoint by a local militia. We were meant to be executed at dawn. Our captors wanted to send a message not to us, but to the international community. Michael didn't move. He had lived this story, but he would never tell it, because it wasn't about glory. It was about doing what was necessary and surviving it. Diana continued. An extraction team was deployed, but they were too far. The timeline was too short. We were out of options, until one soldier operating independently disobeyed the standard perimeter protocol and infiltrated the compound. Alone, with nothing but a suppressed weapon, a satellite earpiece, and what I later learned was a promise to his daughter that he'd come home. Daisy looked up at Michael. "Was that you?" she whispered. Michael said nothing. He just gently squeezed her hand. Diana's voice didn't falter. He neutralized 5 guards. Got every hostage out. Took a bullet in his thigh and still carried me half a mile to the evac point while under fire. The sales team was now completely still. Even Devin looked shaken. Diana turned to face Michael, her voice softening. I never saw him again. Until today. Then she turned to Tessa. And you told him to leave. Tessa's face flushed with humiliation. Her voice cracked. I didn't know. No, Diana said. You didn't ask. Michael finally spoke gently. She's not the first. And she won't be the last. He looked toward the others, his eyes steady. It happens every day. To veterans in parking lots. To working parents in discount stores. To quiet men in old coats. He glanced at Daisy. People look and see worn fabric instead of worn courage. They see boots instead of burdens. They see a girl with flowers and think she's lost instead of remembering. Diana stepped aside. Michael turned to the full floor of staff salespeople, receptionists, managers, all standing in a semicircle. Now their self-assurance melted into silence. He raised his voice, but only slightly. I came here today not to buy anything. I came so my daughter could place flowers in the car her mother dreamed of before cancer made time a luxury. He took a breath, slow and even. But since I'm standing here, I want you to understand something. Respect is not a reward for wealth. It's not something reserved for uniforms or titles or names on plaques. It's the starting point for how we treat every human being who walks through those doors. The silence deepened. Then a quiet voice spoke. I remember you. Everyone turned. An older man in gray coveralls stepped out from the service bay. Oil-stained hands, faded baseball cap. His name tag read, Marty. I was in the Marines, guarded an embassy in Tunisia. I remember your face from an ops briefing. They showed your photo. Said if we ever got eyes on you, we'd be looking at a ghost who walks. Michael gave a humble nod. Then I guess they were wrong. Marty chuckled. Maybe. But I remember that op. Heard you saved a senator's daughter once, too. Thought it was a legend. No, Diana said quietly. It's just a man who keeps his promises. Tessa took a small step forward. Her voice shook. I owe you an apology. Not because of who you are, but because I forgot who I was supposed to be. Michael tilted his head. Which is? Tessa swallowed. Someone who doesn't make assumptions. Someone who leads by example. He didn't respond immediately. Then softly, we all stumble. What matters is what we learn when we look up. She nodded, eyes wet. Daisy stepped forward, no longer hiding behind her father's leg. She walked toward the Cadillac, pulled something from her coat pocket, and gently opened the driver's door. From her hand, she took a new flower, a fresh white peony, and laid it gently on the seat. Mom always said this car made her feel like she was flying, she said aloud. So I wanted her to have wings today. The room held its breath. Devin turned away, rubbing his eyes. Even Diana pressed her lips together, visibly moved. Michael walked to Daisy, placed a hand on her shoulder, and then he looked around the room once more. No longer just a guest, no longer invisible, no longer misunderstood. It's time, he said, we remember that not all heroes need medals. Some just need to be seen. Daisy's flower still rested on the leather seat of the burgundy Cadillac, its soft petals catching the light streaming in from the showroom's high glass panes. For a moment, it felt like time itself had paused, not out of reverence, but reflection. Michael stood beside his daughter, one hand resting lightly on her back, the other still holding the drawing she'd made the night before. Around them, the room had changed. No longer a showroom, now a sanctuary. No longer a place for sales and signatures. Now a place where the past whispered softly into the present. Diana Matthews stood across from them, her gaze not on the luxury vehicles she had spent a lifetime building into a brand, but on the man who had once shielded her from death and now refused to ask for anything in return. But some debts, she believed, could never go unpaid. She turned to the gathered staff, still half-circled around the scene, all watching, many now rethinking the person in the green jacket. "There's something I need to share with you," she began, her voice calm, clear, and certain. "And something Michael has been too humble to say himself." Michael looked over, not alarmed, but quietly bracing. Diana stepped closer. "3 months ago I made a decision, one that would secure not just the future of this dealership, but the values it should stand for. Quiet dignity, respect, service without expectation." She turned, now facing Tessa directly. "I transferred full operational authority, including ownership of this location, to Michael Turner." A collective inhale swept the room. Tessa blinked, as if the words had arrived in a language she didn't speak. Devon's jaw visibly dropped. Even Marty in the service coveralls took a cautious step back, like he'd just seen a torch passed in silence. Michael didn't flinch. He didn't beam. He didn't gloat. He simply looked at Diana and said quietly, "You didn't have to tell them." But Diana's eyes held firm. "No, Michael. I did. Because they need to understand who they're learning from." She turned again to the staff. "I've built my life and this company around precision, reputation, and results. But none of that means anything without heart, without honor." She gestured toward Michael. "This man didn't just save my life in a war zone. He carried me when I was bleeding, shielding me with his own body. I'd never seen anyone move with such calm under fire. He didn't speak unless needed. He didn't shout. He just acted." Michael's eyes dropped for a moment, his jaw tight. The memory wasn't glory. It was pain. And afterward, Diana continued, her voice softening. "I asked for his name. He gave it and said only this: 'There's always someone worth carrying. Today it was you.' Then he disappeared before the chopper could land." Daisy looked up at her father, her eyes wide. "You carried her?" she asked. Michael crouched beside her again. "Yes," he said gently, "just like I carry you." Daisy didn't say anything, but she leaned into him quietly, protectively. Tessa stepped forward. Her voice was small now. Real. I don't understand," she admitted. "If you've been the owner this whole time, why didn't you say something?" Michael stood slowly. His eyes met hers. Not cold, not angry, just steady. Because character doesn't need an introduction, and respect that has to be demanded isn't worth keeping. Tessa lowered her gaze. Her face flushed. Diana took a deep breath. Michael wanted to keep the transfer confidential while he observed the culture here. I agreed. But after what I saw, the judgment, the assumption, the disregard, I realized silence has a cost too. She looked at her staff, not with anger, but with gravity. "This is your chance to rebuild, to become something more than just a showroom, to be human again." Michael walked toward the front desk and set down the manila file Diana had given him earlier. "I'm not here to replace anyone," he said. "I don't want fanfare. I don't want plaques." He looked around the room. "I just want to build a place where no one walks in and feels small, where a girl with flowers and a memory is welcome even if she can't afford a key." Devon swallowed hard. "That's not how this business usually works." Michael nodded. "Maybe not. But maybe that's the problem." Tessa stepped forward again. Her eyes were shining now. "I was wrong. I made judgments I didn't even realize were coming out of me. But watching Daisy, watching you..." She paused, her voice cracking. "You showed more leadership with silence than I've shown with speeches." Michael didn't answer. He didn't need to. Sometimes silence is the loudest voice in the room. Daisy tugged on his hand. "Dadya, sweetheart, can I ask something?" He knelt beside her again. "Anything." She looked at Tessa, then the other staff. Can we come back again? Not just to remember Mom, but to help people. Like give them flowers when they feel sad. Or maybe draw pictures for the service guys who work all day." Michael looked into her eyes and saw her mother. That same light. That same instinct to heal the unseen. He smiled. "That's the best idea I've heard all day." Diana turned toward the desk. "I'll have a guest art wall installed in the waiting room. Daisy can be our first feature artist." The girl beamed. Michael extended a hand toward Tessa. It wasn't a command. It was a bridge. She took it and held it longer than she needed to. And in that moment, something passed between them. Not rank, not power, just understanding. By the time the lunch hour arrived, the energy inside Prestige Motors had shifted completely. What had begun as a routine day, luxury cars, closed-door quotas, and status-driven sales tactics, had now turned into something far more personal. No one had left the floor. Not a single customer had walked in, and not one employee had dared excuse themselves, because something far more important than sales was happening. A recalibration of values. Tessa Morgan stood behind the reception desk, her tablet untouched, her mind still processing the morning's unraveling. The man she had dismissed an hour ago was now her boss. But more than that, he was something rarer. A man of substance who had chosen silence over status. Michael Turner hadn't said much since Diana made the announcement. He hadn't lectured. He hadn't criticized. Instead, he simply pulled out a chair near the center of the floor and sat with Daisy on his lap as she explained the color she used in her drawings to a few curious staff members. "Blue means quiet," she said confidently. "Like when Dad sits by the window and doesn't talk, but still makes you feel better." The staff chuckled softly. Even Marty the mechanic wandered over with a cup of black coffee and handed it to Michael with a nod that said more than words ever could. Tessa watched the scene unfold from a distance. The knot in her chest wasn't just guilt. It was recognition of what she had become and of what she had forgotten. The clicking of polished shoes approached from behind. Diana Matthews. "Mind if I stand with you a moment?" she asked. Tessa nodded quickly. "Please." The older woman folded her arms, surveying the room, the relaxed staff, the warmth between Daisy and the others, Michael's calm presence. "I chose this location to be the first of many under a new leadership model," Diana said. "I wanted to see what would happen when power entered quietly, not through a title, but through character." Tessa exhaled. "And I failed the test." Diana shook her head. "You didn't fail. You revealed the gap between appearance and substance. Now you know it's there. That's the real beginning." Across the floor, Michael stood slowly, gently shifting Daisy to her feet. He walked to the reception desk, where a dozen eyes turned to him again. "I'd like to speak to the team," he said calmly. No one resisted. A few staff members leaned against desks. Others formed a semicircle. Michael didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "A few months ago, I received an unexpected message from Diana," he began. "An offer. Not just to oversee this showroom, but to help shape what it stood for. She said the dealership was successful, but it was missing something." He glanced at the luxury vehicles around them. It had polish, but no pulse. A few people looked down. Michael continued. "I didn't accept immediately. I asked for one condition that I could observe quietly before ever stepping into the role." He looked at Tessa for just a moment, not with condemnation but context. "I wasn't testing anyone. I was listening." A pause. "And today, I heard everything I needed to." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper, a list. "I took notes over the past few weeks, not just about procedures, but about people, about how clients were greeted, how phone calls were answered, how the janitor was spoken to, how assumptions were made. A ripple of unease crossed a few faces. But Michael didn't press. "I'm not here to tear anyone down," he said. "This place doesn't need discipline. It needs direction." He placed the paper on the desk. "I've drafted a new set of principles. Not rules. Principles." He looked around. Things like ask before assuming. Listen before responding. Value the invisible. Marty let out a soft and nodded to himself. Michael turned to Devon. "You're good with people. You remember names. But sometimes you talk before you think." Devon flushed. "I am working on it." Michael smiled. "That's all I ask." He turned to the receptionist. "You see everything. You feel the mood before it changes. That's not just admin work. That's intuition. Use it." He looked at Tessa last. Her eyes were braced, but open. "You've built a strong team," he said. "You just forgot what strength looks like sometimes." Tessa swallowed hard. "Would you like me to resign?" Michael paused, then shook his head. "No. I'd like you to grow. Resignation is an escape. Accountability is an education." Diana smiled faintly in the background. Michael tapped the paper once more. "These aren't performance metrics. These are human metrics. And starting Monday, I'll be implementing something new. Silent service days." Eyebrows lifted. "Once a month, each team member will spend one day without your name tags or titles. You'll rotate roles, sit in service bays, answer phones, sweep floors, greet people in plain clothes." A few exchanged nervous glances. Michael's voice remained calm. "You'll learn how it feels to be seen, or ignored, judged, or welcomed." He folded the list back into his coat. "And after that, you'll understand this showroom in a way no sales chart can teach." The staff said nothing, but many nodded, slowly, reflectively. Tessa took a step forward. "And you? What will you do on those days?" Michael looked at Daisy. "Me?" he smiled. "I'll be the one holding flowers." Daisy giggled, "And drawing pictures." Michael nodded. The team chuckled softly, but the message was clear. He would lead from within, not above. Diana looked satisfied. Michael turned once more to the staff. "This place sells dreams on 4 wheels," he said. "But the real value, the kind that lasts, is how people feel when they leave here." He let the words hang. Then he added quietly, "Let's build a place they want to come back to. Not just to buy, but to belong." By mid-afternoon, the light in the Prestige Motor showroom had softened. Sunbeams filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long, warm streaks across the glossy showroom floor. The burgundy Cadillac glowed like a memory preserved in amber. And in the center of it all stood Michael Turner, still in the same green jacket, still the quietest man in the room, and somehow still the most commanding. The dealership had resumed motion. Phones buzzed. Engines rumbled in the back bay. But beneath the business-as-usual surface, something had fundamentally shifted. The staff spoke softer now, listened more, looked customers in the eye. Because one man had taught them more in silence than most managers teach with 100 memos. In the employee break room, Tessa Morgan stood at the sink, rinsing out her coffee cup for the 3rd time. Not because she needed more coffee, but because she needed to do something, anything with her hands. The events of the day still turned over in her mind, like loose coins in a dryer. She'd led this showroom for nearly 5 years. She knew how to close deals, hit quotas, manage egos. She knew when to push and when to flatter. But today she'd been undone by quiet strength. Not anger, not confrontation. Just stillness. And that stillness had spoken louder than any reprimand ever could. She dried her hands and stepped into the hallway, only to find Michael already there, walking with Daisy toward the service bay. Their pace was unhurried, measured. She hesitated, then followed. In the corner of the service area, Marty the mechanic stood beside a lift, hoisting a white SUV into the air. He wore the same grease-stained uniform, but his eyes were brighter, today clearer. Michael approached him with Daisy in tow. "Got a minute?" Michael asked. Marty wiped his hands on a rag. "Always." Michael looked over at Daisy. "She wanted to see how real work gets done," he said with a faint smile. Marty chuckled. "Well, she's come to the right place. None of those sales folks ever walk back here unless something's broken." "Not anymore," Michael replied. Daisy peeked up at the underside of the SUV, fascinated. "Why does the car look like it's smiling from underneath?" she asked. Marty laughed, the kind of real belly laugh that didn't happen often in that shop. "You know what, kid, I've been staring at these things for 20 years and never saw that." "But you're right." Tessa stepped in, arms folded but no longer defensive. Michael turned, slightly acknowledging her. She approached slowly. "I wanted to thank you," she said, her voice steady but quieter than usual, "for not embarrassing me. You had every reason to." Michael shook his head. "I didn't want to win anything." Tessa frowned, confused. "Win," he nodded. "That's how most people think about power. Status. They see life as a scoreboard. But the real work is quieter than that." She considered this. "What would you have done today if Diana hadn't shown up?" Michael didn't hesitate. "The same thing I did before she arrived. Even if no one knew who you were." He looked at her, then back at Daisy, who was now crouching beside Marty, learning how to check brake pads. "The way you treat people when no one's watching, that's who you are." Tessa's eyes watered slightly, but she blinked it away. "I guess I still have a lot to learn." Michael nodded once. "We all do. That's the point." He turned to leave, but paused just before the hallway. "And Tessa," he added, without turning around next time someone walks in. Wearing old boots, ask their name before you assume their worth. Later that evening, the showroom grew quiet again. The front doors were locked. The lights dimmed to evening levels. Most of the staff had gone home. Some humbled, some inspired, all changed. Michael sat at the reception desk, not behind it, like a manager, but beside it, where a customer might sit. He had Daisy curled up next to him, fast asleep with her head on his lap, one of her crayon drawings folded gently in her arms. Diana entered silently, carrying 2 mugs of tea. She offered one to Michael. "Chamomile," she said. "The healing kind." Michael smiled. "You always did know what to bring after the dust settles." She sat beside him. "How's she doing?" Michael looked down at Daisy. "Better than most grown-ups I've met." Diana sipped her tea, then spoke. "You changed this place today." Michael shook his head. "She did." He nodded toward Daisy. "She reminded them what innocence looks like, what memory feels like. I just stood still long enough for them to notice." Diana studied him. "You could have worn a suit, flashed a badge, dropped my name. But you didn't." "I didn't want power," Michael said. "I wanted perspective." Diana leaned back. "You've always had it, Michael. Even back then, in that compound. You didn't shout, you didn't hesitate, you just moved." Michael nodded slowly. "I had one goal, get you out alive." Diana looked at him, gratitude still etched in her expression after all these years. "And today, you did it again," she said. "You didn't just walk into this dealership. You walked into its culture, its blind spots, and you carried it forward." Michael looked around the now quiet showroom. "I didn't come to fix anything," he said. "I just came to say goodbye to a memory." He glanced down at Daisy. "But maybe we're just getting started." Sunday morning arrived with the hush of early fall, the kind of morning that carries memory in the air, crisp, quiet, edged with golden light. Michael Turner stood at the kitchen counter of his modest home, tying a simple ribbon around a bouquet of white peonies. Daisy watched him closely, her small chin resting on the table. eyes wide with quiet anticipation. She was wearing her mother's old cardigan, oversized and faded lavender sleeves rolled twice at the wrists. "You remember which car it was?" Michael asked, carefully tightening the knot. "The Cadillac," Daisy said. "Burgundy. With the wings." Michael nodded. "That's right." He looked up at her. This little piece of the woman he had loved and lost, and offered a soft smile. "You think she'd like this bouquet?" Daisy's nose scrunched in mock seriousness. She'd say it needed just one more yellow flower. Michael chuckled, reached into the second vase, and slipped a single yellow daisy into the bouquet. "Perfect," she declared. By mid-morning, they pulled into the now familiar lot of Prestige Motors. It was officially closed on Sundays, but Michael had a key and something more powerful than access. He had intention. As he and Daisy stepped inside, the silence was warm, not hollow. The dealership now felt less like a showroom and more like a memory folded carefully into the present. Daisy held the bouquet tight in both hands as they walked past the polished SUVs and sport coupes, making their way toward the Cadillac. Michael slowed beside it. The burgundy paint reflected his weathered face, and for a moment, he saw someone else standing there. Her. Not as a ghost, but as a memory with roots. "Would you like a minute alone with Mom's car?" Michael asked gently. Daisy shook her head. "No. I want you with me." Together they opened the driver's side door, and Daisy climbed onto the seat, careful not to scuff the leather. She sat cross-legged and placed the bouquet on the cushion beside her. "She used to say this car made her feel like she could fly," Daisy said. Michael smiled. "She said it on our third date. Where'd you take her? To the top of a canyon overlook in New Mexico. She wore that same cardigan." Daisy looked down at the sleeves wrapped around her own wrists. "She told me," she whispered. They sat in silence. Not awkward. Not empty. Just real. After a moment, Daisy pulled a small folded note from her pocket and laid it gently on top of the bouquet. Michael glanced at her, curious. "What's that?" Daisy shrugged. "A letter. For Mom." Michael didn't ask to read it. He wouldn't. That was hers. Hers, and the memory of the woman they both missed in different ways. Instead, he reached into his own jacket and pulled out a photo worn at the edges, corners creased from years of quiet handling. It was of the three of them. Daisy, just a baby, her mother laughing, Michael in uniform cradling them both. He laid the photo beside the flowers. No words, none needed. Outside the glass walls, a car pulled into the lot. Tessa Morgan stepped out holding 2 cups of coffee and a bakery bag. She paused when she saw them inside the man in the green jacket and his daughter at the burgundy Cadillac. There was something sacred about the image. She hesitated, not wanting to intrude, then gently pushed the door open. Michael looked up. Tessa raised a hand slightly. "Sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt." "You didn't," Michael said. She stepped closer, her heels muffled against the carpet. I thought you might come today." Michael nodded. "It's been a year." Tessa's voice softened. She was beautiful. Michael's eyes didn't leave the car. She still is, just in different ways now. Tessa set the coffee on the reception counter and walked slowly toward the car, stopping a few feet away. Daisy turned and smiled. "Hi, Miss Morgan." Tessa smiled. "Hi, Daisy. That's a beautiful bouquet." "I picked the white ones," Daisy said proudly. Dad added the yellow. Tessa blinked back emotion. "It's perfect." A pause. Then she looked at Michael. "I wanted to say, thank you. For letting me stay. For trusting me." Michael met her gaze. Calm, steady. "Redemption isn't given. It's chosen. You chose it." Tessa lowered her eyes. "I still have a lot to learn." Michael tilted his head slightly. "Then you're already better than most." She looked around the space at the sunlight dancing across polished chrome, at the drawing Daisy had pinned on the service board the day before, and at the man who had taught everyone here more with stillness than any seminar could. "You've changed this place," she said softly. Michael glanced at the bouquet in the Cadillac. "She changed me." Tessa nodded. Then she reached into the bakery bag and handed Daisy a warm chocolate muffin. "I remember your mom used to say this was her favorite." Daisy beamed. "It is mine too." Tessa smiled. "I think she'd be proud of both of you." The afternoon passed slowly, like pages turning in a cherished book. Michael eventually walked Daisy to the back bay, where she helped Marty check tire pressure on a demo sedan. She wore plastic gloves 3 sizes too big, giggling the whole time. Tessa watched from a distance, not managing, not correcting, just observing, learning. She picked up a pen from the front desk and wrote a single sentence on the corner of her notepad. "What we assume blinds us. What we observe teaches us." She underlined it twice. Later, as the sun dipped low, Michael returned to the Cadillac one final time that day. He smoothed the ribbon on the bouquet, straightened the photograph, and folded Daisy's cardigan neatly on the seat. Then quietly, he closed the door. With care. With reverence. Like tucking in a legacy. Monday morning. The first business day after the most unforgettable weekend in the history of Prestige Motors. And yet, on the surface, everything looked normal. Phones rang. Tires squeaked softly on the polished showroom floor. A new shipment of SUVs waited out back to be detailed. Salespeople reviewed their appointments. The receptionist tapped quietly on her keyboard, sipping lukewarm coffee. But beneath that surface, something had changed. Like fresh air after a summer storm. Everyone was watching not the clock, but each other. Watching the way words were used. Watching who got greeted first. Watching for the unconscious things they'd ignored for years. Because now, they knew better. And as the clock ticked past 8:00 a.m., they waited. Not for orders, but for Michael Turner. At 8:07, he appeared. Not from the front door, not from the manager's office, not even from the hallway, but from the far side of the showroom windows. He was outside, in his green jacket, carrying a bucket and a squeegee. Tessa Morgan stood inside, blinking in confusion, as he moved methodically along the massive glass panes that encased the front of the building, scrubbing each one by hand, water streaking down onto the sidewalk. His motions, slow practiced, blunt. No one said a word. It took a full 3 minutes before Devin broke the silence. "Is he washing the windows?" Marty chuckled from behind. "Guess he is." Another pause. Tessa stepped forward, watching. Michael reached the next pane, dipped the sponge again, and kept working sleeves rolled up sunlight, hitting the moisture just right to reflect a rainbow sheen on the glass. Tessa turned to the receptionist. "Did he ask the janitorial staff to come in today?" "No," she said. "I thought you scheduled them." Tessa shook her head slowly. She opened the door and stepped outside. Michael glanced up as she approached, but didn't pause his work. "I thought we hired a cleaning service," Tessa said carefully. Michael nodded. "We did." "Then?" "Why are you doing it?" He stopped scrubbing and looked at her, not with condescension, not with message-sending drama, just calm, even truth. Because leadership begins at the smudged places. Tessa tilted her head. "I don't follow." Michael pointed to the window, now half clean. Mirrors. Windows they both reflect. But if they're dirty, people don't see clearly. Customers. Staff. Even ourselves. He dipped the sponge again. This place has spent years looking out at the world through glass covered in assumptions. He looked at her. I figured it was time to start cleaning the view. Inside staff had started to gather at the windows. They didn't gawk. They observed. Some were confused. Some inspired. And one, the youngest intern, quietly retrieved a second bucket, By 8:20, Michael was no longer alone. Tessa returned inside and gathered the team. "All right," she said, clearing her throat. "New schedule this week. Michael's implementing silent service days." A few staff members shifted uncomfortably. "Today's focus," she continued. "Perspective." Devin raised his hand hesitantly. "What does that mean?" Tessa gestured to the window. "It means you're on glass duty." He blinked. "Me and you," she added, pointing to the finance officer. "You're with Marty in the service bay for an hour. You'll rotate out after lunch." Marty raised an eyebrow. "Guess I'm getting a partner today." Tessa smiled. "It's voluntary, but encouraged." Michael stepped inside, then wiping his hands on a towel bucket left by the door. He said nothing, just nodded to the team. Devin glanced at the window, then at Michael. I don't know how to wash glass." Michael handed him the squeegee. Neither did I, until I tried. In the back hallway, Daisy sat cross-legged on the floor, next to the break room, her sketch pad open on her lap. She was drawing the Cadillac again, but this time in the reflection of the newly cleaned glass. Tessa walked by and stopped watching. "Is that your mom's car again?" Daisy nodded. "Sort of." Tessa knelt down beside her. "What's different this time?" Daisy held up the sketch, eyes bright. I added people in the window. Reflections. Because now when I stand in front of the car, I can see us. Tessa looked at the drawing, then at the showroom glass, and realized the girl was right. By noon, something strange had happened. People smiled more. Customers lingered longer. The coffee in the waiting room didn't taste better, but somehow felt warmer. Because respect had returned, not with a speech, but with a sponge, a shared task, a clean mirror. Later that afternoon, Michael gathered the team briefly near the front desk. He didn't bring charts. He didn't have a clipboard. He had his green jacket draped over a chair and a coffee mug in his hand. "I'm not asking anyone here to change overnight," he said. "I'm asking us to see more clearly. Each other. The people who walk through that door. Ourselves." He glanced toward the shining windows. "Next time you look out at the world from inside, here ask yourself what the glass is hiding. A beat. Then wipe it clean." The sky outside Prestige Motors had turned the color of soft ash, that quiet gray before twilight settles in. Light filtered through the freshly cleaned windows, casting long golden rectangles across the floor. The dealership, though open, had grown hushed. Not in tension, in reverence. Behind the glass office, Michael sat with Daisy at a small round table. She was finishing her third drawing of the day, a portrait of Marty the mechanic, holding a wrench and smiling. "He doesn't smile like that in real life," she giggled. Michael raised an eyebrow. "Maybe he will if you give him that." Across the floor, Tessa Morgan stood by the water cooler, her fingers wrapped tightly around a paper cup, gone warm and soggy. Her heart beat faster than it had all day, and not from caffeine. She had been avoiding this moment. Not deliberately, but instinctively, like one might avoid a mirror when they know they won't like what they see. But now, there was no more putting it off. She walked toward Michael's table slowly, like someone stepping across a narrow bridge in the wind. He saw her coming. Didn't stand. Didn't brace. Just waited. She stopped a few feet away. I was wondering if I could talk to you," she said. Michael gently set down his coffee cup. "Of course." Daisy looked between them. "Should I go?" Michael shook his head. "No, sweetheart. Stay. This one's safe." Tessa took the seat opposite him, smoothing the hem of her blazer like it might steady her voice. "I've been working here 8 years," she began. "Promoted to manager after 3. I've handled lease disputes, managed mergers, trained half the staff here." Michael nodded slowly. "That's a lot of responsibility." Tessa swallowed. And yet she continued. None of that stopped me from looking at you the other day and making assumptions. Ugly ones. Michael said nothing. Tessa looked him in the eye truly for the first time. You were wearing that jacket. You walked in with your daughter. You didn't ask for help. You didn't look like someone with money. She paused. And I treated you like less than human. Michael didn't interrupt. He let her carry the weight herself. I'm not proud of that, Tessa said quietly. In fact, I'm ashamed. Michael's voice when it came was steady, measured. You're not the first person to see a veteran and see poor instead of service. Tired instead of sacrificed. He looked at Daisy, who was pretending not to listen, but her crayon had stopped moving. But you might be the first to come back and say it out loud. Tessa's throat tightened. I don't deserve your kindness. Michael shook his head gently. Redemption isn't about what you deserve. It's about what you're willing to become. She blinked. Then I want to become someone better. Michael looked down at Daisy's drawing, then back at her. Good. Because this place doesn't need perfect people. It needs honest ones. Tessa sat back. I've spent years trying to prove I could lead like a man. Be sharp, be quick, take control. Michael smiled faintly, and she sighed. Turns out the most powerful person in the building is the one who said the least. Daisy grinned. That's my dad. Michael's smile widened. Tessa took a breath, steadier now. So, what happens next? Are you replacing me? Michael raised an eyebrow. Would replacing you teach the others anything? Tessa looked surprised. I guess not. Michael nodded. Leadership isn't about never falling. It's about standing up in front of everyone and saying, this is how you get back up. A long silence passed, and then Tessa did something unexpected. She stood, walked to the center of the showroom floor, and clapped her hands once. Team, can I have a minute? The staff paused, some emerging from behind desks, others peeking from service bays. Tessa waited until they had gathered. She cleared her throat. 3 days ago, I asked a man and his daughter to leave this building because of how they looked. Heads turned toward Michael. He was quiet, kind, polite, and I dismissed him. I didn't ask his name. I didn't learn his story. She paused, breath-catching. And it turns out, he not only owns this dealership, he saved Diana Matthews' life overseas. A ripple of murmurs. Tessa continued. I'm not telling you this to confess. I'm telling you because I want to be held accountable. I want to grow here. And I want all of us to remember we don't sell cars. We serve people. And we can't do that if we judge the moment someone walks through the door. Michael stepped forward, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. He turned to the staff. She just gave you a model for how to lead, and I hope you were watching. The room was quiet. Then Marty clapped. Once, then twice. Soon others joined. It wasn't loud, but it was real. That evening, after the last customer had gone, Michael returned to the Cadillac. Daisy followed, slipping into the passenger seat this time. Tessa appeared in the rearview mirror, standing by the front desk, watching them. Michael nodded at her reflection. She nodded back. Redemption had begun, and it was contagious. The late afternoon sun filtered through the windows of Prestige Motors, casting a golden haze across the floor, where shadows of luxury vehicles stretched like memories caught in amber. Diana Matthews sat on a weathered leather bench just outside the showroom. Legs crossed, a light cashmere shawl draped across her shoulders. She watched as Michael emerged from the side hallway, his green jacket still dusted with sunlight, Daisy's laughter trailing a few steps behind him, like birdsong. He didn't see Diana at first. He wasn't looking for an audience. He was simply living as he always had, quietly, honestly, fully present. When he spotted her, he slowed his pace and walked over. Daisy followed, gripping a sketchbook in one hand and a half-eaten oatmeal cookie in the other. Didn't think you were still here, Michael said, offering a polite nod. Diana smiled. I find myself coming back more often now. Not as the founder. Not as the boss. Just as someone who loves this place again. Michael didn't speak, but the small tilt of his head said he understood. Daisy sat beside her, legs swinging. I drew you something, she said, holding up the sketchbook. Diana adjusted her glasses and leaned in. It was a soft pencil drawing her sitting on the very same bench shawl over her shoulders, a car key dangling from her hand, but her other hand was open, outstretched toward a child. What's this? Diana asked softly. That's you, Daisy said, giving away the keys, but also giving a gift. Michael looked down at the drawing. His eyes softened. Diana blinked once, a slow breath rising in her chest. She's got her mother's eyes, and her father's clarity. Michael smiled faintly. She sees things we miss. Diana placed a hand over the drawing, absorbing its weight. Do you know why I stepped down, Michael? I figured you were ready to retire. Diana chuckled. I'm too stubborn to retire. I was just tired of running something that no longer reflected me. She paused. When I built Prestige Motors, it wasn't about chrome or horsepower. It was about trust, about delivering dreams without deception, about giving people something that made them feel seen. She looked out toward the sunlit parking lot, but somewhere along the way, I let the numbers lead. I let polish replace purpose, and I started mistaking productivity for meaning. Michael listened without interruption. So she continued, when I tracked you down. It wasn't just gratitude, it was a call for help. You didn't just save my life back then. You're saving this company now, one moment of grace at a time. Michael looked out across the lot. I'm not building a business, Diana, he said calmly. I'm building a space where people can breathe again. Diana turned to him. Then let me give you something you haven't asked for. Something more permanent. Michael raised an eyebrow. Another title. She smiled. No, titles fade. But legacy, that lives. She reached into her handbag and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was a single page, a legal document transferring long-term stewardship of Prestige Motors to Michael, not just in ownership, but in vision. It wasn't a sale. It was a trust, a living agreement that he could carry forward, adapt, protect, and one day, if he chose, pass on. Michael didn't take it right away. I don't need more power, he said. Diana nodded. That's exactly why you're the only one I trust to have it. Silence stretched between them, soft, unforced. Then Daisy reached for the envelope and held it out to her father. She wants you to carry it now, she said. But maybe later, you'll give it to someone else. Michael looked at her, a girl barely 10 years old, speaking like someone who'd lived 10 lives. He accepted the envelope, not with triumph, with humility. Diana exhaled. Do you know what grace is? Michael. He waited, its power held in gentleness, strength without display, the kind of presence that doesn't need applause to feel real. Michael nodded slowly. Then it's not mine. It's hers. He nodded toward Daisy. Diana smiled. Then you've passed it on already. Inside the showroom, Tessa watched from a distance. She saw Michael receive the envelope, saw Diana's hand on his shoulder, saw Daisy press her cheek against the woman's arm. She didn't interrupt. She didn't need to. Instead, she returned to her desk, picked up a notepad, and wrote, Power changes places. Grace changes people. She underlined it. Twice. That evening, as Diana stepped into her driverless sedan, she turned back one last time. Michael stood at the threshold of the dealership with Daisy beside him, not just a father and daughter anymore, but stewards of something greater than business, a place where respect lived in every corner and legacy was measured not in profit, but in people. The door closed. The car pulled away. And Diana whispered to herself through a smile, "He didn't just save my life, he gave it back to me better." The burgundy Cadillac sat by the front window, bathed in soft orange glow from the setting sun. The showroom had gone quiet long after the last customer had left. Most of the staff had clocked out, leaving only faint echoes of footsteps and the gentle hum of the security system preparing to take over. Michael stood beside the car, with one hand resting on the hood, not possessive, not reverent, but reflective. His green jacket, frayed at the seams and weathered with years of memory, caught the late-day light in soft folds. Daisy stood beside him, leaning lightly against his leg, her sketchbook tucked under her arm. She looked up at him, then at the car. "Are we getting it today?" she asked. Michael took a long breath, looked through the window as the final rays stretched across the parking lot like golden ribbons. "Not today," he said. Daisy tilted her head. "But why not?" "We own the place now. You could just take it." Michael knelt down to her level. His voice was soft, steady. "Because when something means that much, you don't rush it. You earn it." Daisy blinked slowly, thinking about that. He smiled. "And besides today, we came to give something, not take something." She nodded. "The flowers. And the letter." Michael reached into his pocket and gently pulled out a small folded ribbon, the one they had used to tie the bouquet. He placed it in her hand. "A little piece to carry with you. So you remember." Daisy held it gently, closing her fingers over it like a promise. They walked together across the polished floor. Tessa waved goodbye from behind the reception desk, her blazer off, her sleeves rolled up, wiping down the glass countertop herself, not as punishment, but as participation. "Leaving already?" she called. Michael nodded. "She's got homework. I've got dinner to burn." Tessa chuckled. "See you tomorrow, boss." Michael shook his head, still smiling. "No need for titles." Daisy chimed in. "You can just call him Dad." That's his favorite title. Tessa laughed. Noted. As they stepped through the door, the cool evening air kissed their cheeks. The sky was painted in rich streaks of purple crimson and amber, the kind of sky that feels like a whispered blessing. They approached their modest old sedan, not much to look at, not fast, not flashy. But it ran. And more importantly, it carried everything that mattered inside it. Michael opened the passenger door for Daisy, who slid in, hugging her sketchbook tight to her chest. As he settled into the driver's seat, she looked over at him. "Dad, yeah, do you miss her more today than other days?" Michael looked at the road ahead for a long moment before answering. "I miss her differently today." How he turned to her. Some days missing her feels like a hole, but today, it feels like a bridge, like we crossed something together. Daisy leaned her head against the window. "She would have loved seeing you be the boss." Michael smiled faintly. "She always said I was too stubborn to take orders forever." A quiet beat passed. Then Daisy softly, "She'd be proud of you." Michael's grip on the steering wheel softened. "I think she'd be proud of us." They drove in silence for a while, not the awkward kind, but the kind that settles between two people who trust the quiet. At a red light, Michael glanced at the rearview mirror. He caught a glimpse of himself, the lines around his eyes, the silver beginning to creep into his beard, the weathered jacket, the familiar wear of time. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel lost. He felt anchored, not to a title, not to a role, but to a purpose. And to a little girl in the passenger seat who reminded him every day why he still showed up. As the road curved past the edge of town, Daisy broke the silence again. "Hey, Dad." "Yeah, sweetheart. Do you think one day I could run the dealership?" Michael raised his eyebrows. "You thinking of selling Cadillacs already?" She grinned. "No, I just want to make it a place where no one ever feels invisible." He looked at her heart swelling. "You already do that," he said. They pulled into the driveway just as porch lights flickered on along the street. Michael stepped out and opened Daisy's door. She hopped out, hugging her sketchbook like it was a treasure chest. He walked beside her up the steps. Before they entered, she stopped. "Wait," she said. "I want to tell you something." Michael waited. Daisy looked up serious now. "When you stood in the middle of the dealership and didn't yell at anyone, when you just talked and let them listen, I think that's the bravest thing I've ever seen." Michael didn't answer right away. He knelt to her level, looked her straight in the eyes. "Brave isn't loud, Daisy. It's steady. It's doing the right thing when it would be easier to walk away." She nodded solemnly. "I want to be brave like that." Michael hugged her long and tight. "You already are." Inside, the lights flicked on. The house smelled like old wood and lavender soap. A photograph of his wife still sat on the mantel, framed in bronze, smiling forever. Daisy set her sketchbook beside it. "I'll draw her something new tomorrow," she said, "for the next visit." Michael ruffled her hair. "She'll be waiting." Outside, the sky darkened into velvet. The porch light buzzed softly. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked, and the world kept spinning. But in that small, quiet house, in the heart of a girl with a sketchbook and a father in a green jacket, a legacy lived on. Not through power, not through position, but through grace, through dignity, through the simple, unshakable truth that kindness always comes home. Where are you watching from? We'd love to know where in the world you're joining us. Feel free to share in the comments below. If this story touched your heart or made you think differently about kindness, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Soul Moment Story for more uplifting stories like this. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and never underestimate the quiet power of a good heart.